guys, welcome to Deputy Tribe. Hey guys, I'm Cassie Deputy, and this is Deputy Tribe, and today we are going to be reviewing this book called C.S. Lewis, Master Stroyteller, and this is by YWAM Publishing, Youth with a Mission Publishing. Now, this is part of their Christian Heroes Then and Now series. They also have a History Heroes series, and we actually have purchased the entire selection of the History Heroes. And we go through those systematically in our homeschool. And this is one of the first Christian hero books that we read. So these books are less than $10. I think they're around $5 to $8. And they're paperback, see? And they are short, easy chapters. Not a lot of heavy vocabulary. They do sprinkle some vocab words in there, which is nice to increase, your vocabulary. Let's see what else. The authors really research things before they write this. So you can tell, like, for instance, C.S. Lewis, there's a lot about World War I in here, a lot about World War II in here, a lot about the temperature of England and Ireland and that area during that time period. We get a good understanding of, whose lives overlapped each other and how they influenced each other. For instance, this is an obvious one, but C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were, what do they call it when you are together? Clearly, because J.R.R. Tolkien actually led C.S. Lewis to know the Lord and inspired his writings quite a bit. But we learn about, Churchill and just the different, things that are going on in the atmosphere and different people that paths may have crossed and whatnot. So there's also a lot of geography in this book specifically. In most of them, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of social studies, there's a lot of topics that you can cover. One of the things that you can also pair this book with is the audio recording of the book, which we don't have. We do have the audio recordings for all the history books. So you can listen to it while you're reading it, or listen to it instead of reading it, or read it instead of listening to it. But the one thing that we always download is the study guide. So I purchased the study guide. So when you purchase the study guide, you get a whole bunch of information. But this is the main study guide here, if you can see that. So you can scroll down and I will show you. Here's the contents. I don't know if you can see that very well. But it's got different sections. So the first is key Bible verses. So it includes a bunch of Bible verses that you can study and memorize while you're going through the book. Display corner, it tells you gather books in Greek and in Latin, gather newspaper articles from World War II, gather, what else? Different things, and have them kind of displayed as you go through the book so the kids can really see and feel and, experience different things that your author was experiencing on a daily basis. Chapter questions, which I really like. So it has questions for every chapter. I can scroll down and show you here. And we can go through them each chapter. So here's an example. So chapter 1, it's got a vocab word every chapter. And then the questions get progressively harder. So the first few are what happened when Flora got sick? What was Jack and Warren's favorite place to play? So simple questions. And then later on, they're more deep questions. So what would you do if you were in this situation? Or how would you feel if XYZ happened? Or if you were in their shoes, what decision would you have made, right? So then you get deeper questions. Or even research this and let's talk about it. And then all the answers to the questions are in the back of the study guide, which is very cool. But then it has things for all different learning styles. So ideas, even for essays that you want to write, projects that you want to do, book reports that you want to do. That's the study guide. Lots of information. It's got maps, it's got timelines, it's got information sheets the kids can fill out as they go. So lots of cool tools. The other way that we typically use these, now with C.S. Lewis, what we actually did was my kids are working on stories that they're writing because C.S. Lewis was a master storyteller. So each of my kids, after we read, would spend an hour or so working on their stories. So I think one of them is 8 chapters long, one of them's 5, one of them's 7 or something. But they're writing their imaginary stories similar to what C.S. Lewis is doing. So that's kind of how we implemented studying this book. But typically what we do is we get a cheap old composition book, and we just went through Thomas Edison's book, so the history series, and we'll notebook. So they'll have their vocab word from the day, and then whatever I ask them to notebook about. So sometimes it's what happened in the chapter. So you could say, okay, notebook about what we read in chapter 1, right? What happened in his life that was significant. So you could do that. Or you could do, like here we studied Morse code and some other famous contemporaries, that's the word. Other contemporaries we came across. So in this book we would do J.R.R. Tolkien or Churchill or whatever contemporaries came along. You could notebook about that. Here Thomas Edison's different inventions, right? So you could do the different places C.S. Lewis lived. He had a lot of different homes and different hobbies. He was mostly like a university, like school person. So you could study universities. So you could take certain things and really dive into them. When we read Thomas Edison, did a lot of science stuff. So we learned about light and color and electricity and telephones and how they work, right? So lots of cool things that you could do, but pictures, vocab words, you can do graphs, you can do maps. Here's some experiments that we did, right? So this is a fun way to really take these books to the next level. And each kid notebook's a little bit different. Here you can see we printed some of the maps before and filled them out, right? Or the information sheets. We printed our own maps. Oh, here's like an example of the timelines. And then the timelines give you like the things on the bottom that you should be paying attention to while you're reading. So that's kind of a cool way to implement these. So they're very low cost. They're very eclectic as far as like taking it to a unit study or even just as a reader together, because it opens you up to a lot of different ideas and you have something concrete. How do I say this? So we have not yet studied World War I or World War II as a family. So reading through C.S. Lewis, like we're just before World War I in our studies. We just finished Thomas Edison's book. So we're starting to shift out of the Civil War period, heading towards World War I. But now that we read this, my kids have an idea as to what certain things like what war was like, or Adolf Hitler signing a pact, or Germany retreating, right? Like they had no concept of those things thus far. I think they've heard of Hitler, but not, they learned a little bit more. So then when we revisit World War I or revisit World War II in a more like intense and in-depth way, they actually have something concrete to solidify those ideas too, if that makes sense. So like exposing them to more than they can grasp, but then they can recall, oh, I remember when we read C.S. Lewis and we talked about Germany surrendering. Like now I understand more what that meant, right? So that's what another thing I love about these books, because if you get the whole series, they overlap each other, right? So you have okay, it's a little windy out. I got papers flying everywhere. But they overlap each other. So you have this time period, right? And then you might read this book, and his life starts halfway through his life, and then his life starts here, okay? So you understand, oh, and then if you timeline stuff, you understand this person lived with this person who lived with this person, right? So the learning that happens just around these little books is really fun. And then if you read them a bunch and you notebook all the stuff you've learned, you have a really cool record of all the different things that you learned and a timeline showing how they all fit together, and you start making connections. That's really cool. So I really, really encourage you guys to check out my links below. Check out the link to YWAM Publishing. Check out the link to this C.S. Lewis book, which was really fun for us because my girls are going through the Narnia series as we're reading this, and we also are binging on Hobbit and Lord of the Rings because we've never seen Lord of the Rings together. So we've been doing that kind of alongside of this. So it's cool to connect all the pieces. And even understanding C.S. Lewis's life and reading his Narnia books, like, oh, that came from this point in his life, or oh, that influenced this point of his life. So it's been really cool to make the connections together as a family. So if you haven't yet read anything about C.S. Lewis, go ahead and check that link out below and look at his biography. And then I also have a link below where you can you can read or watch or listen to other people's reviews on these YWAM Publishing books. So that's really helpful to get other people's perspectives on how they used it in their homeschool. But that's how we use it. We get the study guide, we notebook, we read a couple chapters a day or listen to a couple chapters a day, and then we discuss things, because that's where the real learning happens, is when we discuss things and bounce ideas off each other. And then we go notebook about what we learned, and then we do it the next day and the next day. And it takes us 2 weeks to get through one of these books, taking 2 chapters a day. So yeah, check all that out below. Give this video a thumbs up. Go ahead and hit subscribe. And I think that's it. Jesus is coming.